Day, good day, good day.
Yeah,
Happy
welcome. Coffee Experts Club. Here we are.
Here
And if
we
you
are.
want to know coffee, this is where the experts hang out. How's the day, man? How are things?
Good. I kind of forgot it was Tuesday actually, and it started snowing earlier. I was like, oh, that time of the year again, huh?
Tri-Cities bringing the snow.
It's a
No,
weird
no snow,
time.
no snow in Southern Oregon, brother, but it has been freaking cold. I think it like low of like 18 or something crazy.
Oh God. Oh, that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. Well, don't say it too loud because Travis and Savannah will really pelt us because Travis posted yesterday -20 or something like that in Wyoming. So
And they have what, like 3 feet of snow all the time until
like
like June.
it's like cleared off the driveway, 3 feet of snow. Cleared off the driveway, 3 feet of snow. So
Oh,
yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Oh man. Well, hey, today's a recap, right? On Stephen Donnelly last week.
Yes, sir. Mr. Stephen Donnelly,
Mr.
the
Stephen Donnelly, BlackRock Coffee regional manager over
mhm.
multiple locations. And one of the few survivors, right? Like I think you always hear about people taking over companies, and like Roasters was part of a big buyout from BlackRock a couple of years ago, and they've been in transition kind of ever since. But Steven's one of the few that have lasted of our era. You and I, obviously, you came out
Mhm.
of Roasters, you were director of all operations at Roasters, and then you left the company right around that same transition point, and then we brought you into Collab because you and I had all those years together, and I was like, that's a smart dude, and you're leaving the company, awesome, why don't you come my way then? Very, very careful not to poach, but at the same time, glad to have a friend on board. So I know that you came to work for me about that time, but you left the rest of the crew really in play. And then I feel
Mhm.
like we've seen over time just the fact that things change, and change leads people to consider change. And I think that's
Yep.
something that seems like that whole entity's experience. But what's been your sentiment? Because you still live in the town. Like what's been your, like, from the outside looking in, which has to feel weird as frick, right? Because all that decade that you were in the underbelly of the beast, managing the
Yeah.
whole thing. What are your thoughts on it? How does it feel?
Yeah, it was definitely when the first changeover, there was a definite sentiment of like, what is this? I'm not going anymore. This Roasters is gone, I'm gone too. Like there Roasters had we had a hardcore following of customers. Like we cultivated that customer base so well. And
Hometown hero, right? Like that was your big
oh
play.
yeah, for sure. And so it was like going through a divorce. People were like, which one do I go with? Do I go with the mom or the dad? But
Right.
yeah, it was definitely like, I had friends, we had family members that they're like, I went there, I'm never going back. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. And I had to keep saying, like, of course it's not the same. It's a different company.
Right.
But I think but that happens with every changeover of a company. Like you take a huge hit initially because people go, it's not the same, can't go there, it's not what I used to love. But the beautiful thing about it is people have very short attention spans
Yep.
especially when it comes to like retail food service. And so
Yep.
you give them 3, 5, 6, 8 months, and they start coming back and they forgot what their favorite drink was. They forgot what it tasted like. And they're like, I can't
That's
have anything else because it'll never be the same. And they're like, but what was it that I really liked? I don't really even remember
uh,
now.
I'll never forget. So a few years back, when Jeremiah Johnson Brewing, we're in the middle of a contract project with them. Just great guys. Jeremiah Johnson, just such a good dude, and they're brewing coming out of Montana, a great beer. But we were looking at grain, a very, very similar conversation, of like, we could get grains cheaper if we sourced it from this place, but it'll change the flavor profile. But I felt like Jeremiah had a really interesting take on it. And he said, listen, here's the deal: is we've changed stuff before, and you don't want to change stuff all the time. But the reality is that human palate changes so frequently that people forget what they liked about what the drink tasted like before, and this becomes the new. So you hear some negativity about it. You know what I mean? We experienced that even when we substituted what Roasters created as Revel, their
Yeah.
proprietary energy drink,
Yep.
in place of Red Bull. Like Wes, the owner, Wes Hayden, was so nervous about numbers and what numbers were going to look like. Of what if we lose Red Bull, and even super anxious about it as we rolled it out, and then had some panic moments. But you and I had to bring back metrics of, hey, listen, sure, there was a slight dip at the beginning, but we've actually grown by 10% 1 month out than any numbers we ever had with Red Bull before. And the best part about that is it's 5 times cheaper than what we were paying for Red Bull. So not only have we grown the traffic count, but we've dropped our pricing. So I think that, to your point, fair and well played, is people's palates change and people's
Mhm,
remembrance and what they think they loved can change over time, which is a crazy
mhm.
thing about people.
Yeah, and even just anecdotally, like I drive by the busiest shop for roasters all the time over here on G Way.
Yep.
And I mean, it's still as BlackRock, it's still got cars lined out to the street, every day. Like there's still
Yep.
people are still coming in because they forget, and then all of a sudden convenience takes over.
That's
Like when
it.
you're like heart like is in a brand and you're like, this is the only brand I love it, I'll go out of my way for it. That's
Yep.
great. And if that brand leaves,
Yep.
like all of a sudden you're like, well, I mean, actually it was pretty convenient that is really close to my house. It is pretty convenient actually that's on my way to work and it's on the way to picking up the kids. All of a sudden convenience takes over and you're like, hey, you know what, this place is pretty good, I'm gonna start going back again.
Convenience, man. It's the king. I remember when COVID first shut us down at that very location, like there at G-Way, and Starbucks was taking forever. You remember that? Like taking
Yep.
forever to rally through it, get back open. I remember you and Wes pushing so hard on keep the doors open, whatever it takes, like keep us, because we can right now take a power play on anybody that was going 2 blocks up the street to
Yep.
Starbucks right now because coffee is convenient when it's only 2 more blocks away. And then the hope is you make them sticky and then they come back to you from there
Yep.
moving forward. They never even go back and migrate back to whatever they knew because I think obviously stacking excellent coffee up against a Starbucks equivalent, like once people get that taste, they're not going to probably go back to what they experienced at Starbucks. A lot of times it's just a recognition on a corner when they were driving by. They didn't know if they wanted to try the new local hometown place, but then
Mm-hmm.
when their favorite place shuts down and they start going to this, it just becomes familiarity, right? Convenience. And I think you're
Yep.
totally right. Like obviously we all have hometown brands that we're like, I would never eat any place else. And then they go away and we're like eating it someplace else up the street because you've got to meet the convenience. There's no way around that.
Especially when it comes to the coffee industry, like I think that's probably a good rule of thumb for most new coffee owners to realize is that convenience is always the default. Like you
Yeah.
can always build up from there, but you're always going to default at convenience. If everything
Yeah.
else is the same, which is
Yeah.
more convenient. If I am opening a location across from Starbucks or something, um, if our products are the same, if our service is the same, if everything's the same, everything defaults to convenience. So if Starbucks is slammed and they have 10 cars in the drive-thru and I have one, I become more convenient and all of a sudden, boom, I'm there. And that's when you want to meet the customers with extra service, an
Yeah.
even better product. But it
Yeah.
all comes down to convenience. So if you're not convenient, start there, make your locations convenient, and then
Yeah.
work up the service, the product, everything else to start beating out your competitors.
Which I know we're talking to all different kinds of people that are watching and thinking about coffee or have coffee businesses or growing coffee businesses. I feel like all different kinds of people tune in for coffee experts, but I will say it does all origin back to that spot. I think it's interesting that you brought all the way back there of new locations. Like think through to yourself, how easy is it to get in and out of here? Like don't put yourself in some place that's not convenient to get in and out of, because even if you have the best location, if it's a pain in the ass to get in and out of it, people will choose not to go there, so like be thinking about ingress, egress, and then visibility, and then product competitiveness, like how competitive are my prices, because I do think price still moves people, and all those different things are things most people like. I think sometimes we as people can fall in love with our brand so much we forget that we're consumers at the core, and bottom line is no matter how fancy, no matter all the things that you do, no matter all the ways that you're trying to be so unique and different, it really does come down to how fast can I get my cup of coffee, right? Working on your car times, like how cheap am I going to get my cup of coffee, and how visible is it going to be to remind people that you have fast and cheap coffee? I mean, like how do you make it in, and then stack all your differentials. I mean, like stack all those things. But if you don't start with that at the base, like if you're way out of line price wise and you're convenient, well, you're going to lose people. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like if like just thinking through what are the things that make people stick with a brand. Interesting for sure, especially talking about taking over brands. I think that things like
that's to BlackRock's credit. That's what they noticed really well was like, holy cow, they have a prime locations all across the Tri-Cities. I mean, roasters, we did and Wes did a great job of finding those locations that were just like the primo spot. I mean, the Vancouver and 27th location in Kennewick. Well, there's literally it's a tiny parcel of land that's zoned for commercial
Yep.
in the middle of like 600 housetops. Like
Like,
nobody
isn't it like a
else.
roundabout? Isn't it like right there on the
Yeah, on
roundabout?
a roundabout, like
Yeah.
it's just a sneak in, sneak out, super easy. No other businesses around. The closest other coffee shop is, a mile down the street by a grocery store. So you literally just go bloop, and all of a sudden you've just captured an entire, 3 or 4 neighborhoods. And BlackRock, smartly seeing that is like, holy cow, these are amazing locations. All we have to do is come in. The convenience is already there. Everybody always knows this is where I can get coffee, and we just have to meet the baseline expectations of what these customers are looking for,
Yeah.
and they can be productive. Of course, they take the hit because the customers leave because it's not a roasters anymore, but those customers come back and they know that. So I think BlackRock, they're smart in what they're doing, and they seem to be pretty successful still because of it.
Yeah, I think obviously, there are difficulties within chains. We consult for indies and we consult with franchises, like we do it all. But I will say that there are complications that come with a bigger entity. I think we love the indies because of how agile they are. How easy they are to consider a change. With a bigger entity, it's a different deal. As they came in, they did bring different things with them. It's a different business. So, they moved away from frat mix in a powder, like the standard big train that roasters we had helped develop for them, proprietary frat mix, that was really knocking down their costs, and it was a powder base though. And BlackRock's like, yeah, we don't use powder base. We use like a malt, like a ice cream base more for our fraps. I mean? So obviously that went away. BlackRock had their own energy drink, so what we had created with the Revel didn't translate because they had, their fuel, so I think that all those things come with a different taste and texture, that's going to be the difference. And I think that for some people, that there is some of that like ingrained pride in this hometown team. It's not just like your locations or the owner, or like you're proud of what you're serving. It's like no, even just the things, something so similar as taste. Like energy drinks taste different. And perhaps tastes different depending on what you're using to mix them. And so much news, so much change. Not everybody can last that. But to Steven's credit, I feel like he's been one of the ones that's like, listen, it's about serving people. I know that was Wes's big mantra all the way through, and Wes would come down hard on us all the time of, don't forget why you're here. Don't forget why we all have jobs. Like, it's for the people, serving the people. And I think that for Steven, he really is an old guard when it comes to that. Really, it comes down to how are we serving people, how are we raising up leaders. And I really have a lot of respect for him because of that. I think he's such a good quality dude.
Yeah, I mean, he even in our conversations outside of Coffee Experts, I mean, he's got a real love for the employees, and that was something I struggled with when I left. I was like,
you're like, I don't love nobody. I hate everybody.
No, but there's like a sense of responsibility to all the employees, that I had interviewed and trained and hired, and it's tough to be like, thanks guys, see you later. And,
like your babies, like it's all these babies that you grew
exactly.
from little baristas all the way up. And like, I mean, like there are people there that were regional managers that you had brought in at the base level.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of that is a reason why too, that obviously, I mean, Steve's a great asset to BlackRock. There's no doubt there, but I think there is a lot of that sort of responsibility and pride that he feels for all of those baristas that have come in. And it's a big weight to carry, to think, that part of, this region all came up under Steve, and I'm sure they all rely on him for running their region well. Yeah. It's hard to just be like, I'm going to walk away now. Like that's some people do. And some people are able to do that easily, myself included. And some people are like, you know what? No, I'm going to stick around and I'm going to sort of usher these people through into a new company, and sort of take them by the hand into the new company to help foster that. So I think he's done a great job doing that. So, I mean, kudos to him for it.
And, he told us on the show, like, it wasn't like Roasters wasn't his first rodeo. You know what I mean? Like, he had done this once before, with Espresso World or whatever it was before. Roasters had taken over those locations. And then from Espresso World to Roasters, from Roasters into BlackRock. In fact, he had bounced out and worked at another coffee shop, like Seattle area, it sounded like, and ended up coming back. But I think a guy who's been through a lot of different systems, I would think some of the struggle with that would be even metrically how you're being measured. Like you come out of a culture where, we had helped them roll out EOS L10s, you know what I mean? Like a consistent meeting structure every single week. And that was the measurables we were measuring success based on. That's how we knew that Drew was failing and that he wasn't doing his job. Woo! Drew Moody. Good to have you in the house.
Sorry, guys, I'm on Belize time down here.
That's Belize time. 17 minutes later, brother. You better Belize it. So,
better Belize it.
Anyway, like coming out of a system where Steven had all these metrics that he was being measured on, and then you roll in a new company that has a whole different way how they look at things, and a whole different set of things that they're evaluating on. Like a lot of people, that can be tough, that they're not able to adapt.
Yeah.
I just think super big kudos to Steven for being able to be an adaptable person who says, hey, listen, tell me what the new playing field is and I'll meet it. I think I was always really impressed with that about Steven, of how flexible he was. The guy's just so freaking funny, like just so fun to be around, how enjoyable he is, and just how he rolls with the punches. And I think that's really helped him. And man, I hope and I pray and I believe that BlackRock is grateful for Steven being there, because I think if you don't have that continuity, you can bring in other people from other markets. But if you want to keep going without missing a beat, you better have somebody that can keep the continuity, keep the people holding.
Well, yeah, I mean, he even mentioned it too. Like even during the whole changeover, like part of what like helped that change not be as drastic as it was because all the same baristas were there. So customers were like, hey, this is a different company, but at least I know, Jimmy, who's been here all the time. And at least I have some sort of familiarity with who's in the coffee shop. If Steven drops off during that transition, then you probably lose a lot more employees than would have. And that makes that transition even harder, because now those shops don't have all the same familiar employees that the customer is used to. Now the company has to come in and rehire and train all new locations worth of employees. Like if you can keep some of those key players in place during a transition, that helps keep the managers in place, the assistant managers in place, the baristas in place, because they all have that sort of, they feel like there's a piece of concrete that they know. They know that Steven's a regional. They know that if there's changes coming, he's going to help them through it. But if he's gone, there's no old guard left whatsoever. That causes a lot of chaos inside a transition, and it's tough for a company to do that.
Well, I mean, not only the transition of taking someone over, but like who's making your drinks. And even if they're new drinks, like having somebody that knows at least the customer base. Like let's say, like if you change it all, right, you're changing your drinks, your menu, and you're changing the people that know the customer base. We all know the majority of people come into coffee shops and frequent coffee shops and buy more from coffee shops because they love the exchange. They love the exchange at the bar. They love the exchange at the window. And if you lose people that are good at that, I mean, we experience that with very successful stores, even to this day, as Drew and I work with clients like Human Bean Reno, as they see turnover happen there, like you watch sales not do as well because of turnover, because people had familiarity with, and they were willing to buy more from people they knew. And so like turnover is tough anywhere you are, but especially in a transition. So I think Steven's value in being able to hold it, for the sake of people being a familiar face and being able to manage that team, so that when you acquire a store, you don't just see the thing just plummet because I think your customer base drops. But
Yep.
Drew Moody, how's life in Belize, man? How's things?
It's good down here, man. It's good. I run left and then run right and then run left again. Always about 5 minutes behind, but
that's good.
Life's good. It's about 85 degrees and beautiful out, so I got no problem right now.
It's like 30. Ben's it's snowing in Tri-Cities.
Yeah, here it's bad.
Drew, maybe give us your experience a little bit on working with Steven Donnelly, maybe some of the things that you appreciated working with Steven. I know you guys are both regionals at the same time, regionals of different areas. And obviously he's the only guard left from all your friends that were regionals while you were there. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, so Steven I was pretty bummed when I missed the call last week. I really wanted to be on it, but I was doing some traveling, so it wasn't possible. But I had the pleasure of running into him last time I was in town, and we got to reminisce on, we called them the good old days, but of course today will be the good old days someday. So
that's right.
Yeah, he's somebody I've worked with the best, a counterpart that we were, dynamic duo as far as, he balances me out where I need to be more sensitive and I balance him out where he needs to be a little bit more, stern, maybe in my humble opinion.
Mean.
Stern. Yeah, mean. Sure. There's all sorts of ways to say it, but one thing that Stephen had, an innate ability is to see things from another person's perspective, which, of course, from a leadership ability is a very priceless asset. And his way of relating to not just the people that he agrees with, people that he disagrees with, and me being a firsthand experience of somebody who disagrees with him on a multitude of things. He's just a very well-rounded guy, and I remember when his ascension was so fast. It was slow, fast, because he was kind of simmering on the back burner and didn't really, he's not really, he doesn't push too hard, but and then when he became a leader, he has a plethora of ideas of how we can improve the company for not just, of course, the customer experience, but for the barista experience. And that was always, of course, on my MO as well, along with the growth aspect. He introduced a lot of new ideas, not just for, as I said, customers and baristas, but as far as how we ran our operations on the back end, because he's just a whiz. He's just a numbers guy. And, and as you guys mentioned, he's just a funny dude. So him and I could be arguing about anything, and, he just cracks a joke and all the tension out in the room is just gone. It's one of his magical abilities. So I know, Ben, you've been friends with Stephen for a real long time. So I've had the pleasure of working side by side with him for quite a few years. And I just loved working with the dude. And as you guys say, he's a priceless asset to BlackRock. And I think the perfect person who was able to, he was just happened to be in the right place at the right time for the transition, because he is the perfect person for it. Being able to see, like I said, both sides, not a lot of people can do that. So if he can do that and stand strong and be able to guide things in a healthy direction for, the people who stayed and the people who came in who are new, it's going to be he's a perfect catalyst, I think.
I think too, obviously this show is isn't necessarily for coffee consumers. It's for people who are running businesses, and I think that for any of us running something, especially like a business like that, like you want to make sure that at some level you have an acquisition opportunity. Either that you're acquiring or that you can be acquired. But I think that if your path should be to grow, otherwise we've talked about this over and over, like you're not going to make money with onesie twosies. Like you need more locations than that. You need to be able to collateralize the ones that are just a cash cow. And then the some that aren't always going to be your highest collecting store, but it's a rounded presence throughout community. And I think that, I would say for all of us, as we consider acquisition or being acquired, is that we want to make sure our systems are they don't require us. What are the things that are just like stable, lockdown? This is how we do it. Standardizing things. I know, Ben, you and I, when we were building out the franchise agreement as Roasters was going to begin to franchise, and Drew, you were going to be a franchisee. I think all of that worked in harmony. I think one of the things in that was, hey, what are the standards and how do we have it super standardized? And how do we have it standardized so it doesn't depend on Ben, or it doesn't depend on Drew, or it doesn't depend on Wes, or it doesn't depend on Aaron? What are the standards that we set? Because then I think that all that you need at that point then is, if it's an easy system and you have believers in the system, then the hope would be, it doesn't matter who owns this thing, it's just going to travel on. The thing is standard and set enough. But I think a lot of business owners fail at making themselves too kingpin. And then it's like, well, if you remove him, is there a Roasters anymore? Is there whatever the brand is anymore? And I think that for all of us really working towards there's a great book out there called Good to Great, and I think that really thinking through what's going to separate, the two different businesses that have all the same opportunities is the one that thinks about legacy, and the one that doesn't make legacy all about the primary person, the CEO. And how can we make this thing something that has legs that can go on beyond us? And I feel like all three of us contributed to Roasters being that for BlackRock, and I feel like it's cool to see our legacy going on and see cool guys like Stephen being able to carry it forward. But,
yeah. It was, if there's anybody who's going to be able to carry on that ethos, I think that was still around that company, it would have been Stephen, just because he also, he was in it himself, and that's a perfect sort of example for those coffee shop owners who are looking to grow and maybe even acquirers. Look for those those employees, those managers who themselves are bought into the idea of the brand, are bought into the ethos of the brand, or they're bought into the mission, because those people, even though the company might be changing hands, like that mission still resounds for them. For us, it was, make great coffee and serve one another. And so that's a mission statement that even though Roasters might be gone, like you have those people who are bought into that mission statement. That's what they believe, and that's how they're going to serve your customers. If it's a different name on the building, they're still going to be serving their customers with that mission. And if you can identify those as you're potentially acquiring a company or acquiring a small company, you can identify those managers, those individuals. They're going to help be that Steven in your acquisition process that helps guide the rest of the employees through the acquisition, through the transition, and helps keep the backlash to a minimum, because there are still those threads of the OG, the old guard, that's helping people change into what's coming, what's new if you're the acquirer.
Yeah. It's good. Any brilliance to add to it, Drew Moody? Anything to sprinkle in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, man, people don't just come to the business for the coffee. People come for the people. And when the name on the building changes, if the people don't change, then the people who are coming are still going to come. It might take a little bit. I mean, we've all changed jobs. We've all had different leaders in our lives, and new leader is not necessarily as easy to follow as one that you've had for a while. So in lieu of the leader leaving, if the smaller leaders are still in place who are bought into the idea, if you are buying a business, hopefully you're buying a successful business, it's smart to know what made that business successful and to listen to the things that were already going on within the business, because there's a lot of magic in those small businesses that succeed. A lot of small businesses don't. So when you find one that you want to purchase that does, look into why it succeeded and listen to those little secrets that they still hold.
Yeah, I think I've shared the story before, but I do think it's worth repeating. Of when BlackRock first started taking over, obviously my role within Roasters was high level strategy, making sure we're watching all the numbers, make sure we're thinking through logistics. And they came in, they started making tweaks, and I remember when I still had visibility into all the financials, me just saying, hey, just be careful the things you tweak with, because I know Roasters is performing better than BlackRock is performing. Like I know that. And so be really careful what dials you start twisting over here, because what drew you to this deal, what BlackRock loved about the deal was how profitable the stores were. And we had worked really hard to drive down those things, whether it's like the matrices of how many people work per shifts, and making sure we're really staying on top of that, making sure, man, speed, like we've worked on that like a mother, like of how fast stuff you want. Then things like energy drinks, like efficiencies on how cheap we were getting energy drinks, and how cheap we were getting frat mix, and how we're cheap. We had really banged down our commodities pretty radically. And we had several conversations with BlackRock about, hey, maybe you should just leave this its own standalone brand out here in the Tri-Cities, because there's something magic that's happening here. And I do think that that's something to be considered as you think about wrapping things into your brand. Is could there be ancillary standalones that are just have their own magic? That be careful of that, and then just like adopting and assuming your way is better, when really let numbers speak to that. If your numbers aren't as good, really ask yourself, could there actually be something that this smaller entity could maybe teach our larger entity by way of how they're managing some of their systems? To your point, Drew, of what made this company successful enough for me to want to purchase, and then really asking yourself, let's backtrack that and ask ourselves, let's challenge our other shops, because I think there's there's a lot of power in, hey, why aren't you guys over there in that other district performing as well as the Eastern Washington district for BlackRock? Because I think that Roasters was a magical thing, and it was cool to be a part of. And I'm glad that the three of us have tracked on, and that Steven is still in league with us. But all the cool things to talk about in Coffee Experts Club.
All the cool things.
All the cool things.
Drew Moody, it was great having you for 14 minutes today. I just want you to know, like I cherish those 14 minutes of my life.
Guys.
All righty. Hope you guys have a great day. Coffee Experts, we'll see you next week.